Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Tonight, in a new development, police in Baltimore, Maryland, have turned over the investigation into the death of 25-year-old Freddie Gray to state prosecutors one day early. Meanwhile, a massive student protest marched through the heart of the U.S. city on Wednesday evening. VOA's Victoria Macchi reports from Baltimore.
Corey Johnson wants change from her government, and she wants action from her peers to make that happen.
We want to put pressure on the city to give us answers because this could have been us that this happened to. This literally happened 15 minutes away from our campus, 15 minutes away from our lives, and we pretend like it didn't.
More than 1,000 high school and college students marched behind her and other protest leaders in one of the largest demonstrations following the death of Freddie Gray. Alongside them, a man whose favorite baseball team, the Baltimore Orioles, played to an empty stadium Wednesday. Baseball officials banned spectators following post-game skirmishes earlier this week.
Closing a baseball game is not a good thing, but it's not what's really important right now. What's really important right now is remembering the death of Freddie Gray and trying to get this city where it needs to be.
Earlier in the day, a smaller crowd convened at the entrance to the Baltimore City State's Attorney's office. The police department will hand the Freddie Gray case over to that agency Friday to determine whether any police officers will face criminal charges. But not all activities were as vocal as the protests. The Baltimore Symphony Orchestra contributed with a free outdoor peace concert. It's a gesture organizers say shows the city is resilient and hopeful. Victoria Macchi, VOA News, Baltimore.
Well, more than a dozen people arrested Wednesday night at a rally in New York City to protest the death of Freddie Gray. Several hundred protesters gathered in Manhattan's Union Square, chanting "No justice, no peace," and "Hands up, don't shoot," as police officers watched. Later, a group of protesters spilled into the street and disrupted traffic. The police moved in and began making arrests. Officers with batons had to push the crowd back into the sidewalk as protester was being arrested and was led to a police van. People shouted, "The whole world is watching." Other demonstrations were held in Boston, Minneapolis, and Washington, D.C. Well, and back in Baltimore today is VOA reporter Victoria Macchi, who joins us live via Skype. Now, Victoria, has the tone of the city changed from yesterday?
It is still very peaceful here. There are a few more protests planned later this week, but we've definitely seen a big difference from minor skirmishes on Tuesday night. And the protests have really, turned quite calm and much more peaceful.
Now, what's happening, like in terms of how the city officials are engaging with the citizens? We know that the police have been kind of pulled back a little more, but what are some of the activities that are taking place to ensure that the city comes back to life?
It's really difficult right now because what we're seeing is the curfew is still in place at night from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. So it's really stifling a lot of businesses. That's what we've been hearing from business owners. There's still a bit of tension. There's a very, very heavy police and military presence throughout the street. So while it is peaceful, it's this uneasy peacefulness. We're trying to, I think people are trying to gauge really how long this is going to last, if it's going to last, and what they need to do to make it stay that way.
Now, are citizens calling for more demonstrations in the days to come?
There is the same group that organized the protest yesterday. That was the biggest protest I've seen in a week of being covering Baltimore and what's been happening following the death of Freddie Gray. It was more than 1,000 students turned out yesterday. It was really, really massive, stretching several city blocks. That same group is organizing a protest for tomorrow afternoon, Friday, near the area where Freddie Gray was arrested. That's the biggest protest that we have on our radar right now.
What is the significance of the authorities there handing over the case of the death of Freddie Gray to the prosecutors early?
So that happened this morning. It was anticipated earlier that would happen on Friday, but it did happen today. We don't know what the contents of the investigation are yet. Now it's going to be up to prosecutors to decide whether any of the 6 police officers who had contact with Freddie Gray that day will face criminal charges. At the same time, the U.S. Department of Justice is conducting a parallel investigation to see whether any civil rights violations occurred.
Well, Victoria, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Victoria Macchi of Voice of America reporting live via Skype from Baltimore. Now, for more perspective on the underlying causes behind the increasingly tense situation between the police and citizens in a number of U.S. cities, I'm joined by Melvin Foote, President of Constituency for Africa. Mr. Foote, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Now, there has been a lot of talk around the country regarding what we are witnessing as a clash between citizens and the police. What is really the cause? What is the issue, from your understanding?
Well, the issues are really deep and profound. And, if you really want to talk about it, it goes back to where African Americans first came to the shores of the United States as slaves. And ever since then, the struggle has evolved to where it is today. It's still not where it need be. And so you got civil rights are routinely ignored, and the struggle has gone on. And what we're seeing today, I think the media has played a major role. Now it's cameras everywhere, so we see it. And I think this is the difference between what has been going on for really hundreds of years and what is going on today. There's no real difference. It's a continuation of the struggle.
Yeah. Now, for some, they're looking at a case like of that in Baltimore, where the city is a fairly black city. There's a black mayor, an African-American chief of police. Almost half of the policemen are actually of African-American in terms of the composition. Now, tell us, what is the difference in that particular scenario?
Well, I think the way these cities are structured, sure enough, the physical changes are you see today that you didn't see, say, 30, 40, 50 years ago. In Baltimore, you do have a black police chief, a black mayor. But what you don't have is opportunity. And most of these communities are bereft of any kind of economic opportunities. The unemployment is around 50%. You got all kinds of youth who have no hope. And so I think a lot of this is fueled by a lack of economic opportunity, a rage of what they're seeing on TV and what they're seeing on social media. And you put that together as combined to create what we're now seeing in Baltimore, but it's a bad situation.
So who really undermines that? Because like in the case of Baltimore, I had some young people say, well, it is a class thing. The people in charge are black like us, but they don't care about us because we're poor.
I have to buy into that. I think, you have a situation where it is a class thing, and you got African Americans who don't themselves identify with the plight of blacks. So that is a true charge. I think it's a class thing. I think that there's poor people who are hopeless. I think some of these poor people are white. I think some of them are Latino. There are other races who also will find themselves alienated from the leadership class. So it's a very complex situation.
So you'd say to resolve this, you have to tackle the issue of economic situation of people.
Yeah, I think that the solution is in education, it's in job creation, it's in training, it's in creating opportunities for people to live a better life.
Well, Mel, thank you very much for joining us today. Melvin Foote is the president of Constituency for Africa.